Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of our Change Your World series. We're so glad that you're joining us today. And if you've been tuning in, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time, thank you for checking us out. We were really excited about this journey we're going on. And before I dive into today's topic, I just got to share with you something that's cool to me. Hopefully you'll find it cool too. But we've been talking the last couple months about how we are a church that's focusing and passionate about next generation transformation, looking at the generation that's coming behind us and investing in their lives and equipping them, raising them up. Well, this last week, some cool things happened that I want to share with you. Number one, for the very first time since before COVID, our students met live last Sunday night for what we call student pizza. They got together and had an opportunity. They're going on the Change Your World journey with us, and so they're talking about the same topics that we're talking about on Sunday mornings, and so they got a chance to get together, and I got to be honest, I'm a little jealous. I kind of want to see, maybe if I shave my beard and wear a baseball cap, they'll let me sneak into the group, because it was a lot of fun. I actually was eavesdropping on them last week, and they were having a lot of fun, and it looked like something I wanted to be a part of. You know, if it was for nothing else, the pizza meal was pretty delish. I'll be honest, I took some pizza. But it was fun to watch the kids get to connect together for the first time live and talk about these different topics that we're talking about. And also, they have some fun competitions. They actually were in teams, and for the next 7 weeks, they're going to be in teams competing against each other for a really cool prize that they wouldn't share with us last Sunday, but they're going to talk about it this week. They're going to reveal what that grand prize is for the winning team. But overall, everyone's going to be a winner because they have an opportunity to go to Bullwinkles together, to be able to learn about these topics together and have some fun. So one of the things that we did as a staff team before they met is we actually prayed individually for every name of every kid that was going to be here, every student that was going to be here on Sunday night, that God would be working in their lives. And that was really meaningful for something for me. And I hope that if you're investing in them, you're praying for them, that's meaningful for you to know that their lives were being changed right before my eyes on Sunday night. That was cool. Also, I didn't get a chance to sneak in as much, but I did eavesdrop on the preschool group Sunday morning last week as they met together. Those kids are adorable. It was cute to watch them meeting together, also on this Change Your World journey together, learning the same stuff we're learning. And then midweek, I got to sneak in and watch the elementary kids as they did their very first Change Your World Zoom call and talking through, again, the same topics and having fun together in community. So thank you for those of you who are investing in them, and thank you to you parents who are making it a priority for your kids and your students to be part of this group. We know it's a sacrifice. We know it's hard to fit these things into your schedule, but I'm telling you, it's an investment that is paying off and will pay off, and so continue to stay the course. Make that a priority for them. We'll try to make it as easy as possible for you by making it the best hour of their week when they're coming together. So we'll keep encouraging them to be a part of that, and then, of course, you continue to model for them the behavior of you being on your church service on Sunday mornings, that they get to see that happen. And then if you have students or kids that aren't plugged in, man, get them hooked up. There's links that you can connect to on the Connect form that you can get them plugged in so that they don't miss out on what's going on, because there's a lot of cool stuff happening. So thank you for bearing with me as I shared that, but I want to share that cool stuff as it comes along for you guys to be a part of that journey. You get to see not only what us adults are doing, but also what every different season of life is happening in the lives of our families at church. So that was cool. Now, just a quick review for those of you guys who are tuning in for the first time, or if you tuned in before and just want to be refreshed on what we're talking about with Change Your World. Each week of this series, in this blueprint of what it means to change the world, builds on each other. And so I want to remind you, the first week on Easter Sunday, we talked about how Jesus is the hope of the world. He gives us the hope, the rock that we can lean on. He's our springboard to know that when we jump into action to change the world, we have a reason to. And then last week we talked about how if we want change to happen, first the change has to start with us, because we can't take people where we're not going ourselves. And we also talked about how, although it might seem daunting, this idea of changing this world, this mass of people and their lives that are out there, and how do we make a difference, we talked about how we can make a difference in the lives of the people around us. And so that's what we've talked about leading up to today. Today's topic, part 3, is this: somebody do something. Somebody do something. It's just kind of like a plea in that. It's like, please, would someone just do something to change the world? Because I think when we look around the world, we would all agree, I don't think we have to state a case for the fact that things in the world need to change. But I got a question for you. Are you waiting for change to happen? Are you expecting someone to rise up in government to change the world? Are you expecting that the entertainment industry is going to wake up to the need for them to create content that leads us in the right direction? Are you looking towards the healthcare system or the education system to bring about the change that we all desire to see happen in our world today? Are you looking towards sports icons to be the models that we follow to lead us to a better life, that everyone, kind of shifts culture to going to a better place? Do you feel like the answer is your church or your faith community? You're waiting for someone to step up to change the world. I love history, and I've loved when I was growing up, and even after I got out of school, learning about historical figures, iconic figures that have kind of emerged on the scene in the world in their generation, and they've put their stamp on the world. They've created a movement, like people like Abraham Lincoln, an icon who in our nation led our nation from a government position to abolish slavery. I mean, he led us through the Civil War, and I think many would look to Abraham Lincoln and say he was our best president that we had. You might disagree with me, but I've heard it said often that he's my wife's favorite president. Good old Abe Lincoln. I think it's because he's tall and I'm short. She likes that about him. I don't know. But the point is that Abraham Lincoln is one of those iconic figures that who left his mark on our nation at least, but I think the world as well. Do you think of people like Billy Graham in the faith community who stepped out and went on these crusades? He called them the Billy Graham Crusades, and whether in front of people live or on TV, literally talked to billions, not millions, but billions of people about the gospel, shared his faith with them, and shared about the hope that they could have in their lives, and changed so many lives through his life. Do you think of people like Mother Teresa, another icon who, through her compassion and her caring, went to India and gave her entire life to serving people in India who were less fortunate, and really inspired many people, an entire generation of people, to want to be like that, to live up to that standard. One of my favorites is Martin Luther King Jr. and what he did for the civil rights movement. He was the most prominent figure in the world for the civil rights movement in his generation, and literally changed our nation, and I think changed the world's perspective when it comes to racial inequality. And we see these iconic figures, and we're kind of hoping, I am kind of hoping that another one will emerge, because as I look around the world today, I don't see any of those, like the caliber of people that I just mentioned. I don't see any of those people emerging in our culture, and I think about and pray about hope that one of those figures would emerge in our culture to kind of lead us to a better place in our world today. You're waiting for someone else to change the world. The reality is that most of us are waiting for somebody to do something about the problems we see. We want change, and we hope that someone somewhere will do something about it. I shared this quote with you a couple weeks ago. If you were tuning in, I want to share it again. It's by Augustine of Hippo. He says, "Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are." And in my conversations, I'll be honest, in my own life, as I look around at the things that are going wrong in the world, it's like it disgusts me, and I get irritated and frustrated, and I complain about all that's going wrong in the world. That's kind of that daughter of anger. Like I'm just like, I'm adamant things need to change, and I talk about how bad they are and they need to change. But don't forget, hope has two beautiful daughters. Anger at the way things are, but also courage that they don't stay that way, that someone steps up, someone with courage steps up and makes something happen that changes the world. So you need to understand the negatives in life may attract our attention and open our eyes to the need for change, and that's important. But only by being positive and by helping to create and offer a better place can we positively change our world. See, there's a gap in where we are at and where we think the world should be. There's this gap of success. Like if we were to succeed in creating a movement that actually changed the world, here's the gap. It's the difference between I should do this and I do this. Because we do a lot of talking about what should happen, and we do a lot of complaining about the way things are, but are we actually stepping in and taking action to make the world a better place? See, the smallest deed is bigger than the greatest intention. I'm reading this book here, Change Your World. In fact, I've actually gone through it a couple times, on my third time through this book. And if you read this book, you'll hear things like this, but John Maxwell in his book tells a story, an illustration. He says, there are 5 frogs sitting on a log, 4 decide to jump off the log. How many are left? And if you think about it, the obvious answer is 1. But the real answer is 5, because deciding to do something and actually doing something are 2 different things. You can decide all you want, But unless you actually step out and take action, nothing has happened. Those 5 frogs are still sitting on the log no matter how many of them decide they're going to jump off. Action has to happen. See, initiative on fire accomplishes more than knowledge on ice. And we have to actually step out into action. We have to make something happen for anything in the world to change. And the vast majority of people, unfortunately, they don't lead their life, they accept their life. It's a passive thing instead of an active thing. We need to be intentional about our lives. We need to take our life by the horns, and we need to lead it in the path that it needs to go. We need to lead our life down the path we know is the right way to go, rather than just passively accepting whatever comes our way. In fact, I believe there are 3 types of people in the world. There are confused people who ask the question, what happened? There are comfortable people, and those people say, it just happened. But then there are catalyst people, proactive people that are saying, I made it happen. And I think in order for changing our world to happen, to actually take place, we have to be in that final category. We have to be people who are catalytic change. So we talked about this last week, to be catalysts for change. In order for a movement to happen, we say, I made it happen. With the power of God working through my life, I don't do it on my own, but with God working through me, with the hope of Jesus in my life, I made things happen. That's what I'm calling us to today. Changing anything in our world requires that someone has to be a catalyst for that to happen. When it comes to changing our world, the first person transformed is the catalyst. They're the agent of change. I think of Marvel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think of secret agents. And I think what we need to we need to be change agents. We have to be willing to be agents of change in our life. That's why we're doing these transformation groups that, they're closed, by the way, by then. You can't even get in one anymore. They're closed and they're up and running. We kicked them off this week. I enjoyed thoroughly getting to be in my group. I've heard great reports from those who have led groups, that facilitated these groups, that great things are happening in these groups. But the reason why we're doing transformation groups is we're hoping that each of us in these groups, not just them, but us, that we transform in these groups because of the values that we're learning in our life, these godly values that we adopt and live out in our life. And as they transform us, we become catalysts. And once we are a catalyst, we can become an agent for change. With that in mind, I want to read to you what Jesus talks about changing our world in some of his final words in the book of Matthew. The author Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples, records what's now known as the Great Commission. And I want to read it to you in Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, and I've been told before, when you have a therefore, you have to ask the question, what's it there for? Well, go back to what Jesus said. He says, I have been given all authority in heaven and earth. He's saying, because of the power bestowed on me, here's what I want to happen. He goes on to say, therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations. That's one of our mandates. In this commission, he's commissioning us as followers of him to go and make disciples of all nations. We have to go. Did you hear the action in that? Go and make disciples. Then he goes on to say, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So we're supposed to bring them into God's family, this idea of baptism, that we're baptizing people into the family of God. And then verse 20, he goes on to say, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. Teach them to obey all the commands I've given you. It's not enough that we go out and share the gospel. It's not enough that we bring people into the family of God, but we also have to teach them the correct way, the way that God has showed us in Scripture of how we follow him. And then I love this last statement. He says, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. There's the hope. We have that hope backing us up, that he is with us always. He is ever present with us always, even to the end of the age. As long as we're on this journey to change the world, he's there with us. But we have to step out and take action. I want to talk about a story, an account in the New Testament in the book of Mark. Mark is the second book or gospel in the New Testament, and the author Mark talks about this story that I find very interesting, where Jesus heals this guy who's possessed by demons. And this story is not in your notes. It's not going to come up on the screen, but if you want to, there is a Bible tab on the online service there. You can click on that if you want to follow along with it. You can pull out a physical Bible. You can get out your phone and look at it on your digital Bible. But I encourage you to follow along. I'm reading from the New Living Translation, and I want to share the story with you. Starting in verse 1 of chapter 5 of Mark, it says, so they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. Now, the Gerasenes, the lake they're talking about is considered the Sea of Galilee. If you know anything about Israel, the Sea of Galilee is on the north side of the Jordan River. And on the west side of the lake was a lot of Jewish settlements. On the east side of the lake was more of the Greek, the Gentile settlements, the non-Jewish people on the east side of the lake. Jesus going to the Gerasenes was now on the east side of the lake in the land of the Greek or Gentile people. In verse 2, when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as often he was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. That's crazy. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. This guy was in bad shape. And he was possessed, we find out later on, not just by one demon, but multiple demons. And he's tormented, and he's literally self-mutilating himself, and he's so strong because of the demon possession that they can't even restrain this guy. Goes on in verse 6 to say, when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." Why would he say that? Well, here's why. Because it says in verse 8, for Jesus had already said to the spirit in him, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Verse 9, then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, this is the demon speaking, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us to those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." In verse 13, Mark writes, so Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. So up at this point, Jesus has now released the spirits from this man, and there's those who are the pig herders that are watching as their herd of pigs goes violently, runs off into the water and drown themselves. They're not probably very happy about that. In verse 14, the herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran, and people rushed out to see what had happened. You think, wow, it's an amazing thing, what's going on? But guess what happens in verse 15? A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed, which, by the way, he was running around naked a lot. He was a streaker, yep, and he perfectly sane. But you would expect them to be amazed by that. Here's what actually happens. It says, and they were all afraid. And they go on in verse 16 to say, those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Not come closer and do more miracles. Here's this guy who's forever been tormented. They can't contain him. He breaks all the chains and shackles. He runs around naked, going around, being crazy and raising a whole lot of ruckus. He's now clothed, sitting in his right mind, sane. He's listening to Jesus. He's calm. And instead of focusing on what Jesus did for the man, they're afraid because of the pigs that ran into the sea. Seems a little backwards to me. Verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Now, as we talk about being agents of change, we talk about being catalysts for change, I want to share with you three thoughts, three ideas of how you let this happen in your own life based on what happened to this demon-possessed man, that God freed from this demon possession and what he did in his life. And so if you're following your notes, these are going to go rather quickly, but the first one in your notes is this. Start where you are. Number one is you start where you are. See, we make the mistake of overestimating big events and underestimating the value of small actions taken to help others. We often skip over those closest to us. We want to do big, grandiose things in our life, and we want to make our lives matter, and we want to, have our name be famous because of all that we've done. And we skip over the people that are right here around us that could use just small actions that would improve their life. Maybe it's by spending time with your kids. Maybe it's going on a date with your spouse. Maybe it's by just talking kindly to those people around you and showing by your actions, by your attitude, by the way you interact with them that you value them. And a lot of times we're worried about making big, grand gestures, but we should just start right there. Start where you're at. Here's what Jesus does to direct this guy. It's funny because you have this whole town of people that are begging Jesus to go away while there's this one man who has been released from this demon possession and he's begging to go with Jesus. He begged to go with Jesus, but here's what Jesus said. Here's his response. He says, no, go home to your family. That kind of puzzles me. This guy wants to be with Jesus. He wants to be close to him, probably feels protected, feel safe with Jesus. If, the demons came back, Jesus could, release him from them again. I don't know his motivation, but it almost seems cruel that Jesus would send him back away. He just had this experience, this encounter with Jesus, and now Jesus is saying, you stay here while I go away. But Jesus knows what's best in this situation. He says, start by going to your family. That's where we go. See, we make the biggest impact by starting with those closest to us. Last week, I told the story of the starfish as we opened our first box from our Change Your World kit. And we each got a starfish out of that first box if you were tuned in. We talked about the story of the starfish. I'm not going to go into it now, but essentially the idea is that there are people in your life whose world you can change by your very presence in their life, by your small acts of grace and kindness and love towards them. You can change their world. And yet we skip over these people, these starfish in our life. You could say, I'm not making a difference for all the vast people in this world, but I can make a difference for this. Starfish represents that one person. I can make a difference for them. And instead of doing that, it's just not grandiose enough. And so we skip over that and go to the other people in our life. But we need to start where we're at. In your notes at the end, I put a little worksheet for you, and I want you to look at that for a second with me. I have a question for you. The very first question is this: who do you know? Who are the people in your life? Mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife, son, daughter. Those are the people like in your immediate family. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's a coworker, your boss, your employee. Maybe it's the person who waits on you at your favorite restaurant. There's people in your life that you have an opportunity to impact. And I want you right now to actually consciously make a list. Please don't go past this. Don't just think about doing it some point in time. You'll never get to it. But if you have printed notes, take it and print it or write on those notes right now. If you don't have printed notes, maybe grab a scratch piece of paper, write it on there. Maybe take your phone out and take notes on your notes app. But who are the people in your life that are closest to you? The people that are represented by the starfish in your life that you can actually make a huge impact. You can change their world by your small acts of kindness and the way you treat them and the way you demonstrate for them what a life of change looks like. Who are those people? I want to move on to the second thing that you can do. Number 2, use what you have. So start where you're at, use what you have. Don't try to be someone else. God doesn't bless you when you pretend. Let me try that again. God doesn't bless who you pretend to be. God blesses who you actually are. Don't be tempted to mimic and imitate the traits of the people that you admire most in your life, the people you wish you could be like. You be the best you that you can be. Use what God has given you. Don't try to use what God gave somebody else. Be who God made you to be. And then also don't try to use what you don't possess. Everything that you need right now to succeed in changing the world, you already have. God has already equipped you with what you need. So take what you have and don't worry about what you don't have. Use what God has given you. Don't focus on what He hasn't given you. Michael Todd, a pastor in Oklahoma, said this. He says, what you have in your hands is your weapon for your future. You possess in your very grip the stuff you need to be your weapon to fight your future battles as we work forward and move forward to change the world. Going back to Jesus and how He directed this man, once again, we're going to look at how He directed this man who He cast the demons out of. And in verse 19, this is the second part of the verse, it says, but Jesus said, not only go to your family, He says, tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful He has been. What do you have that you can use that God has given you? What's your story? The guy who was demon-possessed, Jesus told him, you know what you have? You have a story that you can share. You have a story of radical life change that you can share with the people in your life. That's the starting point. That's what you can use in your life. You may not be me. You may not be able to work miracles. You may not be a government figure in one of your cities that people look to as a prominent person. You may not have a reputation. But what you can do is what you've got. And that's the story of what I've done in your life, what I've transformed you in your life. He says, show them how I've been merciful in your life and what I've done for you. We all have a story. I think that the art of sharing our story, our personal testimony, is a lost art in the church. God made each one of us unique, wonderful masterpiece, and He wants to use our story to change the lives of the people around us. And we often forget that's one of the best tools in our arsenal, one of the best weapons within our grip to be able to use to change our world. I want to go back to that worksheet. I have a second question for you. What do you have? What skills do you possess? What talents? What resources do you have? What's your story? Have you thought about what your story is of what God has done in your life? Why do you follow Jesus in the first place? Why does it compel you every week to show up on the services and follow this one we say we have hope in? What has he done for you? Maybe it's time to start thinking about that and draw that story out of yourself so that when the opportunity presents itself, you can share about the hope that you have in your life with other people. Use what God has given you. Here's the third thing you can do to be an agent for change, and that is focus on what you can do. Start where you're at, use what you have, and then focus on what you can do. We spend way too much time focusing on what we can't do. Think about this. A giraffe should not spend all of its time thinking about why it can't climb a tree or swim in the ocean. It was never made for that. But look at that long neck and the long legs, and not to mention that freaky long tongue that comes out of its mouth when it wants to reach a tall branch or leaf. Look what it can do. Focus on what you have, on your strengths, what God has given you. In other words, don't be all focusing on all the things that you don't have. There's a number of things that you don't have or possess, and you were never intended to. It's like the kangaroo. Kangaroo shouldn't focus on why it can't burrow in the ground like a groundhog, or why it can't fly in the sky like a bird. Look at those legs, those feet. Have you ever seen a kangaroo jump? I've heard that they can jump in one leap 25 feet as they're running across the outback. The outback, say it with my Australian accent. But kangaroos are fun to watch. And then don't get on their bad side, because they have a way of jumping up and using their feet like kickboxer, and they can knock you flat. That's cool. Not to mention they have a built-in home for their young, built into their body. How cool is that? Don't focus on what you don't have. Focus on what you do have, your strengths that God has given you, and I guarantee you have some. You just need to stop long enough to think about what they are. Look at what the man does in our story, Mark chapter 5, verse 20. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns. In the Greek, that is Decapolis. Deca meaning 10, polis meaning city. 10 cities is literally what that word means. But he visits the 10 towns, which are this cluster of towns on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. He visits the 10 towns of that region and begins to proclaim the great things that Jesus has done for him. He takes what he's got and he uses that. Starts with his family. He shares about the hope of Jesus in his life. And then he goes to the towns. He doesn't stop with his family. He goes to the towns around him and he starts sharing his faith, his hope in Jesus and what Jesus had done in his life. So going back again to that worksheet, here's my final question for you today, and that is, what can you do? What do you have that you can do? Who are the people in your life that you can be a change agent with? Simple acts done daily. Don't underestimate, what those simple acts can accomplish in your life. It's not the big grandiose gestures. It's not the giant things that we want to do with our lives that count the most. It's the small daily actions, this daily consistency, day in, day out, day in, day out, showing love, being a model for others to follow, giving them a representation of who Christ is and how they could follow him, showing them the correct way and the way that the Bible teaches us and how we can follow Jesus and live our lives for him. What can you do? I want to go back to what I was talking about earlier about those iconic figures, Abraham Lincoln, Billy Graham, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King Jr. We're often waiting for these iconic people to rise up and make change happen. I want to confess something to you right now. I'm a Harry Potter fan. And I love watching, in fact, every year around October, my whole family, we watch the entire Harry Potter series. And I enjoy them because I not only do I enjoy the storylines, but I also often see insights to spiritual themes that come out of them, good versus evil and leadership principles that I've actually learned just from watching these movies. In this last year, I was watching the third installment, The Prisoner of Azkaban. And if you haven't seen this movie and you plan on watching it, just a little word of caution, a little spoiler alert is coming. So just be ready for that. But in this movie, towards the end of the movie, Harry and his godfather are on the shore of a pond where they were running to, and there's these evil creatures called Dementors that are coming to literally suck the life out of them. And while they're on this shore and they're getting the life literally sucked out of them, Harry looks across the pond to the other side of the shore, and he sees someone that he believes to be his dad who comes in and saves the day and basically sends these Dementors running and allows them to be able to be saved. Now, in a rare turn of events, after that has happened, he and Harry and his best friend Hermione get to go back in time, using this thing called a time turner and replay the events of that evening to try and fix some things that didn't go the way they'd hoped that day. And as they come back up to that scene that I just talked about, that fateful scene where Harry and his godfather are on the shore of this pond and these Dementors are coming back in, something interesting happens. And I want you to watch this scene here. So this is Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban. Watch this.
Sirius. Come on!
This is horrible.
Don't worry. My dad will come. He'll come to the Patronus. Any minute now. Right there. You'll see.
Harry, listen to me. No one's coming.
Don't worry, he will. He will come.
You're dying. Both of you. Harry!
Expecto Patronum!
There's a moment in that clip where Harry's friend Hermione says, "No one's coming. You both die." And you see this epiphany that hits Harry Potter in his mind, where he realizes, it's me. I saw myself on the other side of that pond earlier that evening. And as I watched this movie back this last fall, I had my own epiphany. I've been waiting for someone like Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King Jr. to step up to be a change of the world, and I didn't understand that the answer to changing the world was right under my nose the whole time. In fact, the answer to changing the world is in your Change Your World kit. It's time now for us to open that second box. So we're going to open the box for April 18th. There's a yellow sticker on top. The answer to changing the world is right here. This is a mirror. And if you want to change the world, stop waiting for someone else to step up and do it. You are the one to change the world. Take a look in the mirror. If we want the world to be changed, we have to be the ones willing to step forward and be agents of change. I want to go to the words of the great theologian Michael Jackson for a moment. Just joking with you. Calm down. In his song, Man in the Mirror, I want to read the chorus lyric to you. It says, "I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change." And if I were to revise that last line, I would say this: to take a look at yourself and then be the change. Because that's what God has called us to do. That's what the Great Commission is all about, that we're supposed to go into all the world and be the change that people so desperately need. I want to come back to this story, that one last final time, the demon-possessed man in Mark chapter 5, verse 20. To finalize that verse, as he goes to the 10 towns and proclaims the great things that Jesus has done for him, it finishes out with this final phrase, "And everyone was amazed at what he told them." See, Jesus, Son of God in the flesh, face to face with these people. They beg him. They beg him to please leave. Jesus knows what's best. He leaves back an ambassador, someone to represent him, someone that they might trust and believe because they see the change in his life. He says, I want you to go and share your faith. Share about the mercy that I've shown you in your life. And it's interesting, if you continue to read the book of Mark, chapter 5 goes on to chapter 6, but he comes back in chapter 7 where Jesus is back now in this region where he was rejected and begged to leave. And leading into Mark chapter 8, something amazing happens. Not only do the people accept him, but they actually invite him in, and crowds, mobs of people begin to show up around him. And much like you've heard the story maybe of the feeding of the 5,000, which happens on the other side of the lake with the Jewish people, now on the Gentile side of the lake, another crowd forms, 4,000 people. And it's the same similar story, rather feeding of the 4,000 where Jesus says, don't send these people away. They're hungry. They need something to eat. And they end up doing a miracle where a number of fish and loaves of bread are brought out, and Jesus feeds an entire crowd. Now, 4,000 indicates the men that were present, but with women and children, we're talking, like 12 to 18,000 people. Gentile people who had rejected him, and now they're accepting him. They're begging him to share with them the love and the hope that he has. Now, it doesn't say in Scripture, it doesn't connect the dots that because this man did what he did, that's why they were open. But I believe in my mind that if not the main reason, he was a part of the reason. He was an agent for change that prepared the way so that when Jesus came back, the people were ready to hear him and ready to receive his message. Do I predict that we will change the world? No. I'm not a fortune teller. I can't predict the future. I believe that we can change the world. But I love the words of management expert Peter Drucker. He says this, he says, you can't predict the future, but you can create it. And I'm ready to do that. We can create the future. We can chart the course. We can head out for the very first time and create the path that we need to go down to change the world. I believe that we can change the future just by what we do. Now, you guys know a pessimist is someone who sees the glass half empty. They're always seeing the negative side of things. An optimist sees the glass half full. They're always seeing the positive side of every situation. But if you remember, if you were tuned in a couple weeks ago, I talked about how an optimist is someone who passively believes that things are just going to get magically better. But someone with hope, a person of hope, hope is the belief that together we actively can make things better together as a group. And I believe the way you define someone as a person of hope is a different word that maybe it's made up, maybe it's not, a possibilist. Someone who believes in possibilities. And you may be a possibility if one of these 4 things is true about you. I think progress is possible, but I'm not disillusioned. I know it's not going to be easy. I see things as they are, but I'm not discouraged because I know the hope of Jesus backs us up in this crusade that we're on. I am unwilling to look away from the problems around me. You can't put your fingers in your ear, close your eyes, and go, and just expect it to all go away. You're not going to ignore the problems around you. You're unwilling to do that. And then number 4, I am willing to be a catalyst for transformation. And if those 4 statements fit you, you're a possibilist. You're someone who wants to make the change happen that we want to see. We want to create this future before us. I want to warn you, if you go on this journey, not everyone's going to go with you. There will be well-meaning people in your life who just don't understand or don't get it, or think you're a little bit crazy. And let's just be honest. We have a little crazy in us thinking that we can change the world. I believe that's good. But not everyone's going to go with you. Some people will mock you. Some people will distance themselves from you. And during this series, I want to point out to you that I'm talking a lot about the challenges and obstacles that we're faced, but I don't want to paint this picture of this doomsday like, if you follow me, life is going to suck and it'll be the worst thing you've ever experienced and you're going to come up against more obstacles than you could ever imagine. Here was what I think. I think we in the church world who call ourselves followers of Jesus, we've gotten soft. And I believe as maybe your personal trainer, your spiritual trainer, that it's time for me to help condition you for what's to come. See, anything in life that's worthwhile is always going to be uphill. It'll always cost you something. Think about it. In my life, my relationship with my wife is my most difficult relationship that I have ever been in, but is also by far the most rewarding. I wouldn't give it up for the world. Second to that would be my relationship with my kids. and they're the second best thing in my life. So the more important, the more valuable something is in your life, the harder it is. That's just a fact of life. So I want to prepare you that although there are challenges ahead, and although not everyone's going to go with you on this journey, not everyone's going to accept what you have to say, you going to let that stop you? Are you living in this ideal world that somehow you're ready to go forward and be a part of making change, and everyone's going to agree with you and everyone's going to go on that journey with you? It's not going to happen. Even Jesus in Scripture, he said this, he said, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it. But you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Strong words. But words to remind us that even Jesus didn't have everyone go with him. How many people say no to you does it take for you to stop? Are you willing to stay the course? Are you willing to be an agent of change? See, you have to be willing to go on this journey. You have to be true to yourself and to your vision. Here's one thing that I've learned in this last year that I want to share with you. This is a secret that has been big. It's been eye-opening in my life, and that's this. If you do what you believe in with passion, with strength, and with courage, and you step out and you stood up for what you thought was right, it gives you moral authority. See, on the front end of moral authority, before you have moral authority with the people in your life, they hardly give you the time of day. And you'll have a lot of opposition. But on the back end, they almost bow to you as though you can't do anything wrong. Because moral authority shows them, it shows character, and it shows that you're somebody that's worth following. And I've found in this journey that the more that I step out and do what I believe in, don't care about the naysayers, and I don't care who is in opposition to what I have to say. I don't care if I got men's approval or even my family's approval. I don't care. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, and I believe passionately that God has called me to it. Here's the surprising thing. It's very freeing. See, I've often been bound by the shackles and chains of trying to seek the approval of people in my life because I don't want people to not like me. And so constantly, I'm in this battle of what I know to be right and what I want to do because I don't want to give up the people in my life that are close to me. I don't want to give up popularity. I don't want to give up my reputation. And so I fight this battle. And it's very, very confining in my life. But as I've released that and said, I don't care anymore. I'm going to go the way that God has called me to because it's the right thing to do. It's been very freeing in my life. You'll gain strength and courage in the process from doing that. And I want to point out to you, as we wrap up today, that it's time to check your excuses at the door. I don't want to hear that you're not old enough, that you're not young enough, that you're not beautiful enough, that you're not witty enough, that you're not smart enough, that you're not free enough in your schedule. The excuses can go on and on and on, but here's the deal. Everyone here, excuses are like armpits. Everyone has them and they all stink. And often, the worst excuse is a good one because you'll buy into it and you'll follow through with it. So if you're feeding yourself excuses right now that you shouldn't go on this journey, I'm telling you, give up the excuses because if you want to be a change agent, if you want to be someone who is a transformation catalyst for the people around you in your life, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. But I'm also aware, I'm not naive. As I talk to you right now, not everyone's going to go on that journey with me. And I'm prepared for that. And if you'll go on that journey with me, I want you to adopt the words of the song I've said the last 2 weeks that I learned growing up. Though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning back. We talked about icons like Abe Lincoln, Billy Graham, Mother Teresa. But there's some pretty fantastic people who have done a lot to change their world that you'll probably never hear of. And as I'm connected to John Maxwell in this book, Change Your World, I heard of a story recently about this lady named Gabby in Paraguay in South America. And I want you to hear her story of how she changed the world. This is Gabby's story.
I love people, and I love my people. For me, the Paraguayans mean a lot. And when I see that woman in the street trying to do something to survive, and when you're in a situation, a better situation, you start asking yourself, what can I do, to help them, to add value to them, and to maybe show them that there is a better way. I went to Guatemala, and what I saw there and what I lived there just changed my whole life. And I came back to my country, sure that it was going to happen here. I was talking to John about it, and when I think about that moment in the States, and I have the picture right now in my mind, in front of John Maxwell with my passport, and John giving me the word transformation. And today I look at that, and he's here in Paraguay doing a transformational movement, a national transformational movement. That says a lot.
So we just this week have brought 250 of our leadership trainers. They will be spending time teaching these facilitators how to have a roundtable. And by Thursday, we'll have 15,000 of them trained. Those 15,000, the very next week, we'll begin to train 5 to 7 to 8 each. So you can quickly see that within about 10 to 12 weeks, approximately 70 to 75,000 Paraguayans will be trained in having leadership values.
We want to serve the Paraguayans. We're here to invest in them, to train them, to give them the tools, and to say, hey, now you go and do it. Just do it. You can be great, and you can have an awesome life, a life of significance. That's the life we want to live. And I know with John Maxwell and the team and the coaches, we're going to accomplish that.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if history would report that you became the catalyst for transformation in your country?
When I'm working with Transformation Paraguay, I think a lot about my kids, because this is what I'm building for them. I want them to have a better country, a better Paraguay than the one that I have. For the people that have the same dream and that also want to transform their country, they just need to do it. They just need to believe.
So excited that I would be able to be a part of something like this. I'm so excited that we have people like Tim and Gabby who decide to make a difference in their country. Didn't make sense. Had no insiders helping her. Couldn't have explained it if you would have asked her. Everything worthwhile is uphill.
So Paraguay is going to be a model. That's the word. Paraguay is going to be a model for other countries. That's my dream. That's what I believe. We are doing something wonderful. And not only for Paraguay, for more countries. This is just the beginning.
You see, it's not extraordinary people who change the world. It's people like you and me. Look at yourself in the mirror. You, right here, are a picture of a change agent who changes the world. It's ordinary people like Gabby who start where they are, use what they have, and they focus on what they can do. You know, if you read this book, one of the benefits is you'll read dozens of stories of ordinary people like Gabby who are literally changing their world. I encourage you to. We're now this week going through chapter 3 if you want to stay on pace with us, but I encourage you to read this book. I want to close out by saying this, that God is looking for courageous people who want to step up to be change agents. Not like a secret agent, but a not-so-secret agent of change. I'm looking to see, are you willing to go on that journey with me? Will you be one of those? Let's pray. God, thank you for the opportunity to learn from Scripture about ordinary people who did extraordinary things, and also to seek and gain wisdom from Jesus as he shared his life with the people in Scripture and gave them guidance and helped them to learn a better way. God, I ask for each person who is listening to this topic today, that they would be inspired to step up, to be a change agent. God, that they wouldn't let excuses hold them back. They would take action for you. And like Gabby, just be an ordinary person doing ordinary things day in and day out that change the world. You would inspire us and mobilize us and cause us to take action for you, live out our faith for you. Give them courage for that this week, God. In your name I pray. Amen.